Good evening. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. We're going to continue with our book reading, The Secret Terrorists by Bill Hughes, and we are in chapter 6, and it is entitled World War One. The heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, and his wife were in Sarajevo, I believe, on July 26, 1914. As they made their way through the crowded streets in an open carriage, shots rang out, and both of them were dead. The people of Sarajevo were predominantly Serbians. Their religious conviction was that of the Orthodox Christians. Since the year 1054, the Catholic Church has been waging war against the Orthodox Christians. 50 years prior to the assassination, the Croatians, who are Catholic, were becoming extremely vocal about their hatred for the Serbians, who were a rival of Rome and needed to be exterminated. Pope Pius X, in his hatred of the Orthodox Christians, was continually inciting Emperor Francis Joseph of Austria-Hungary to chastise the Serbians. After Sarajevo on July 26, 1914, Baron Ritter, Bavarian representative at the Holy See, wrote to his government, "The Pope approves of Austria's harsh treatment of Serbia. He has no great opinion of the armies of Russia and France in the event of a war with Germany. The Cardinal Secretary of State does not see when Austria could make war. If she does not decide to do so now, there, in true colors, is the Vicar of Christ, the Pope, the Gentile apostle of peace, the Holy Pontiff, whom pious authors represent as having died of sorrow at seeing the outbreak of war. Edmund Paris, The Vatican Against Europe, the Wycliffe Press, page 14. One may say quite specifically that in 1914, the Roman Catholic Church started the series of hellish wars. It was then that the tribute of blood, which she has always taken from the peoples, began to swell into a veritable torrent. Page 48. Thus we see that the Pope realized that if Austria-Hungary crushed the Serbs, then the Serbs' Orthodox Christian brothers from Russia would enter the fray. Then Germany, France, and others would join in, and you have World War I. The papacy was thrilled to see Russia enter the conflict. Russia was predominantly Orthodox, and the papacy wanted the Orthodox Christians in Russia and around the world annihilated. The papacy's Jesuits had another reason for being so happy when Russia entered the conflict. It was payback time. About 100 years before World War I began, Alexander I, the Russian emperor, kicked the Jesuits out of Russia. The Russian emperor, Alexander, was currently compelled to issue a royal decree in 1816, by which he expelled them, the Jesuits, from St. Petersburg and Moscow. This proving ineffectual, he issued another in 1820, excluding them entirely from the Russian dominions. R. W. Thompson, The Footprints of the Jesuits, Hunt and Easton, pages 245 and 246. 5 years later, Alexander was poisoned to death. The Tsars were under Jesuit attack. Alexander II broke all diplomatic ties with Rome in 1877 and even proposed a constitution. Alexander II had progressed well with his great reforms and attached his signature to a constitution to be adopted by Russia. The next day, a bomb was thrown at his carriage, which killed and wounded a number of Cossacks who accompanied the carriage. The emperor, in deep sympathy, left the carriage to look at the dying men when a second bomb blew him to pieces. Arno Gabalion, Conflict of the Ages, the Exhorters, page 85. Finally, in 1917, the last Tsar and all his family were murdered. Never again would a hated emperor from the house of the Romanovs rule Russia or ever again protect the Orthodox Church. Payback time had come. The overthrow of the Tsarist system, therefore, brought with it the inevitable overthrow of the established Orthodox Church. To the Vatican, which had waged war against the Orthodox Church since the 11th century, the downfall of her millennium reign rival was too good to be true. Arvo Manhattan, The Vatican Billions, Chick Publishing, pages 120 and 121. Who was it that aided and financed the Russian revolutionaries in their takeover of Russia? Who backed Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin as they created revolution and bloodshed throughout Russia? The instruments of this new alliance between the Soviets and the Vatican were to be the Jesuits, described as the hereditary enemies of the Orthodox Church. Reportedly, there were a large number of representatives at the Jesuits' order in Moscow during the Revolution. James Zatko, Descent into Darkness, University of Notre Dame Press, page 111. Among the 1,700, no, that's 100. No, that's a million. I'm sorry. Among the 1,766,188 victims up to the beginning of 1922, figures obtained from the Soviet documents, nearly 5,000 were priests, teachers, nuns, etc. of the Orthodox Church. Nearly 100,000 Lutherans banished, whole villages were wiped out, thousands of churches of the different branches have been demolished, and the work of destruction goes on. Arno Gabellion, Conflict of the Ages, The Exhorters, pages 103 to 106. The actual Jesuit financiers of the Revolution were to be found in America. William Franklin Sands, a director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, had just contributed $1 million to the Bolsheviks. Anthony Sunton, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Verdes Publishing, pages 133 and 134. Jack Schiff was the principal Jesuit in America, who was assigned the task of taking over the American banking system and establishing the Federal Reserve. Jacob Schiff came to America in the late 1800s with orders from the Rothschilds to get control of the American banking system. By the turn of the century, 1900, Schiff had mastery of the entire banking fraternity on Wall Street. Myron Fagan, The Illuminati and the Council of Foreign Relations, Tate Lecture. Since Schiff had control of the Federal Reserve Bank, he now had a source of money to finance the communist revolution in Russia. In the February 3rd, 1949 issue of the New York Journal, American Schiff's grandson, John, was quoted by the columnist Kali Knickerbocker as saying that his grandfather, Jacob Schiff, had given about $20 million for the triumph of communism in Russia. G. Edward Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island, American Opinion Publishing's page 265. I just ordered that book, by the way, just to let you know. Yeah. In today's money, that $20 million would be $420 million. Money essentially stolen from the American people through the Federal Reserve Bank. Jacob Schiff was in control of the entire banking fraternity and was financing a government whose avowed principles are the direct antithesis of the United States Constitution. Schiff pretended to be an American capitalist. He was living in America, but his sole objective was that of the papacy, the ultimate destruction of America. There were other goals that the Jesuits hoped to reach with World War I. All the great nations, including the United States, were war-weary, devastated, and mourning their dead. Peace was the great universal desire. Thus, when it was proposed by the Woodrow Wilson to set up a League of Nations to ensure peace, all the great nations jumped on that bandwagon without even stopping to read the fine print in that insurance policy. Myron Fagan, the Illuminati, and the Council of Foreign Relations, taped lecture. After World War I, an attempt was made to set up a one-world government, and the League of Nations was established. Senator Henry Cabot Lodge Sr. prevented the United States from joining the League of Nations. The Jesuits' plot to create a one-world governing body from which they could control the world was stopped only temporarily. This part of the Jesuits' plan had to wait another 27 years for a repeat performance when the Second World War would result in the United Nations. Before we look at yet another reason for the papacy's delight in the First World War, let us look briefly at the President Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was controlled and dominated by Colonel Edward Mandela House. Wilson said, "Mr. House is my second personality. He is my independent self. His thoughts are mine, and mine are one." Charles Seymour, The Intimate Papers of Colonial House, I'm sorry, guys, forgive me. Houghton Mifflin, Volume 1, pages 114 and 115. For 7 long years, Colonial House was Woodrow Wilson's other self. It was House who made the state for the cabinet, formulated the first policies of the administration, and practically directed the foreign affairs of the United States. We had indeed 2 presidents for one. Super ambassador, he talked to emperors and kings as an equal. He was the spiritual general liaison, of the administration. George Varick, The Strangest Friendship in History, Woodrow Wilson and Colonial House, Liverite Publishers, pages 18, 19, and 33. Varick says on pages 106 through 108 that while Wilson was running for re-election in 1916 on the platform of "because he kept us out of war," House was negotiating a secret agreement with England and France on behalf of Woodrow Wilson that America would enter the war immediately after the election. House was also intimate with the power centers of money and power in Europe. House had close contacts with both J.P. Morgan and the old banking families of Europe. G. Edward Griffin, The Creatures from Jekyll Island, American Opinion Publishing, page 239. Edward Mandell House totally controlled Woodrow Wilson. House was a Jesuit carrying out their every desire. He used, hold on 1 minute. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm back. Sometimes I just get this, I don't even know, I can't even describe it. Let me start it over. Edward Mandell House totally controlled Woodrow Wilson. House was a Jesuit carrying out their every desire. He used Wilson as a puppet to create the League of Nations for the Jesuits. Wilson was nothing more than Rome's tool to do their bidding. Another reason for World War I was to pay back Germany for its opposition to the papacy and the Jesuits in the 1860s and 1870s. Germany was the birthplace of the hated Lutherans. Twice during this time, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck led Germany, known as Prussia, almost looks like Russia, but it's Prussia. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Prussia. All right, to military victories over the Jesuit-controlled countries of Austria in 1866 and France in 1870. Bismarck also outlawed the Jesuit order with the Curcam of Law in 1872. These crimes against Rome and the Jesuits had to be repaid in kind. Hence, many thousands of Germans were slain in the bloodbath of World War I. Germany was also the country most affected at the end of the war. The victorious nations of Europe used the Treaty of Versailles to plunder Germany. The treaty imposed such an unfair burden of war reparations on Germany that when the French leader, Clemenceau, was asked by the press that the leaders had given the world by the treaty, he said, "We have guaranteed another war in 20 years. The Germans agreed to the terms because they were weak and defeated, but they swiftly rebuilt and attempted to pay back their enemies for the debt given to them after World War I. That payback was World War II. After World War I ended, the Jesuits did not get what they wanted. Woodrow Wilson and Edward Mandell House managed to get them the League of Nations, but it failed miserably because the United States did not join. Therefore, another war was necessary, a war so devastating that the people would cry out for a United Nations. This was one of the goals of the World War II. We will look at this and other reasons for World War II in our next chapter. For some reason, I stumbled over this chapter. I don't know why. Sometimes, I don't know, I get nauseous and I don't, it's weird. I don't know if it's the basement or what. But anyway, brothers and sisters, that completes chapter 6. Next time we will read chapter 7, which is World War II. All right, keep your eyes on Jesus. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you will not sin against God or be deceived. Till next time, brothers and sisters, stay strong. I love you all. Bye-bye.